Welcome to Multifamily Grit, where we bring in the experts to share the pros and cons and celebrations and struggles of one of the most important industries in the U.S., multifamily property management. I am joined today by David Keinert, Executive Vice President of Operations at Aeon, a nonprofit dedicated to creating and sustaining quality, affordable homes that strengthen lives and communities. David brings over 20 years of expertise in customer experience, operations management, learning and development, and marketing with a proven track record across diverse industries such as higher education, hospitality, and multifamily housing. I'm really interested in the fact that he holds an MBA from the University of St. Thomas, where he also earned a graduate certificate in transformational change and organizational development. He also has his bachelor's degree in marketing from the University of Minnesota. Today, we're going to dig into that change experience and explore his unique love for change and how he has used it to create exceptional success along his journey, from the fast-paced hotel industry to the nonprofit sector. And we're also going to discuss his insights into the unique challenges of affordable housing and his strategies for fostering a culture of continuous learning and innovation. And before we get started, we are sponsored today by the only core property management operating system built with an emphasis for affordable owners and operators. Fortress revolutionizes affordable management by reducing applicant processing time to help you save money, generate cash, and drive your teams to success. And don't forget, if you like what you hear today, please like, subscribe, and share with someone that you think might enjoy this episode. So, David, thank you so much for being here with me today. You're my first guest in the new year.
I love it.
And you got to endure some of the pain of getting this set up for the first time this year. I do apologize. It was a little bit of chaos. I can own that.
All good. All good.
Well, thank you. So before we dig in, would you mind sharing with our listeners how you got your start in the multifamily industry?
Yeah, I think like most people in the multifamily industry, I fell into it. I actually wanted to be an airline pilot. And
Really?
when I started college, my second week of college was September 11th, 2001. And that changed the trajectory of airline pilots. And I had to take a hard look at myself and be like, do I still want to go into this or do I want to do something else? And I
Yeah.
was working at a hotel at the time and just decided, hey, this is still travel, hospitality, still have the opportunity to see the world if I want to. So I got my associate's degree in hotel restaurant management, working in the hotel along the way, and had a great career that spanned Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, and got to travel to a lot of different places and help out a lot of hotels. Uh, did things called task force, which is you either go help a new acquisition, kind of get acclimated to a new management company or a new brand,
Yeah.
as well as repositioning and openings. But as you know, you travel a lot for work. It wears on you quite a
Yeah.
bit. And I got to the point where something had to give.
Yeah.
And one of my former colleagues was doing consulting work in human resources for a property management company. And she called me and she's like, David, are you sick of being on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, working every holiday? I'm like, yeah, I am. And she's like, hey, I have this portfolio director position open. I think you'd be great for it. Your experience is completely transferable. And took the leap into multifamily housing as portfolio director. And uh, admittedly, I hated it at first. Um,
Really?
it was similar to the hotel industry, but very different in the way that we actually look at our customers. And one of my first days on the job, I had a brand new resident that had a terrible move in. So I have my hospitality hat on and I
Yeah.
want to like send a fruit basket and like make this right for this individual. And my colleagues and my boss are like, David, we have this lease agreement and page 13 says like, hey, if the unit's uninhabitable, we only refund money for that day. I'm like, but this person couldn't move in. They had to extend their moving truck. They had to go pay for a hotel. The $13 or whatever it is isn't gonna make up for that. And that was a hard moment for myself to be like, I don't know if this is me, if I don't have the power to make people happy.
Yeah.
But I really kind of took that as motivation to, I think I can actually make some change here as to how we're operating as a company, how we're looking at our customers. And that's kind of been my passion going forward.
Yeah. Oh, I love that story so much. And thank you for being so authentic and willing to own the fact that it wasn't the most incredible experience at first, that you had to get through that. And I love that your opening conversation here started with change and that you took it as an opportunity to create change. Something that just really stood out to me, has always stood out to me actually about you from the day that we met through researching you for this podcast. Like, you are not afraid of change in any way. Quite frankly, you clearly thrive in it. And to the point where you even spent a good portion of your education focusing on it. That is so remarkable, especially when in the world of business, we all talk about change management all the time and how difficult it is, but you look at it in a very different light. So I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think my first apartment was like a 400 square foot studio, and I think I painted the walls like 14 times. I get bored. It's my
I
toxic
love it.
trait. I and even in positions like when I get to the point where the company has grown, or in the hotel industry, those assets are bought and sold all the time. And sometimes you're with a management company that wants to bring the asset up, and then sometimes a management company comes in that wants to bring the asset down.
Yeah.
Um, and that's always my point of, okay, if we're gonna start looking at things differently and really scrapping every penny we can out of an asset, this is no longer for me because the change we're putting in place is actually kind of negative at that point. And that's never been what's excited me. So I've always been
Yeah.
drawn to these opportunities of building up, but I'm also astute enough to understand that my building up is somebody else's tearing down. And coming into organizations where folks have built systems and built processes, years in the making, I come in and like, okay, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to change because the world's changed. We got to move from that. That's exciting for me, but that's daunting for others. So when I look at change, it's not just David coming in as a bulldozer, it's David coming in and rallying a team, because we can't change without the people that are actually going to do it. And that's actually really hard to do in every organization.
Yeah. I've had the honor of watching you do this with your team at Aeon and how well you have brought everyone into the fold. And one of the things that I've loved the most is that you always allow people to speak their minds. So, right, like there have been times where there have been really hard conversations and people have had really strong opinions on things. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I look at it as everybody needs this opportunity to process change in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And where I go through the change curve very quickly for myself,
Mm.
I have to recognize that everybody is going through and processing that change, going into denial and maybe despair before they can get start climbing up again and figuring like, oh, okay, this actually was for the better. I can get behind this. And part of that journey is being able to speak their mind. And me as the leader, now I got this gift and I know exactly where everybody's at on that change curve. So I actually know now where I need to devote my time and how to support each and every one of those individuals because they've just told me where they were. If I find out like I have people excited about it, yes, let's figure out a way to rally together and start pulling the team forward. But if I find out I have a majority that doesn't want to change, that's I have to do something very different at that point. And if I didn't let them speak their mind, I would never know that. And I really see that as a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. Saying that I've never heard anyone put it that way before, and I'm going to steal this in my own personal and professional life, but that everyone goes through the change curve at a different speed. So you go through it really quickly, and other people go through it really slowly. Like you mentioned, repainting your walls 14 times. I have lived in the same house for 4 years, and I hate the color of the walls, and I still haven't painted them yet because I struggle with that. I struggle with making a decision. I struggle with change in that way, and I think that everyone has maybe could have different change curves in different areas of their life. Like in business, I don't have any problem making changes really quickly, but personally, I really like that stability and
Sure.
consistency.
Sure.
Um, but that's just such a unique way of looking at it that I love. That everyone has a change curve, and people go through it at different speeds. And so you also mentioned that some people have to go through denial and despair. Are you equating the management of change to like the stages of grief, like the stages of recovery? Is that the way you think
Yeah.
of it? Yeah.
Actually, when you look at the change curve and you Google change curve and you'll see it, it's a straight line of like status quo. And then we know as we implement change throughout an organization, it declines. You go into the state of, I don't want to
Oh,
change. I don't see the need to change. What we're
yeah.
doing is fine.
Yeah.
That denial state. And then you start realizing, like, oh, this actually is the new reality. My complaining didn't make this change go away. And now I'm
Yeah.
here and I have to figure out how to deal with this new reality. And then you start figuring out what does that mean in my new life? And you start climbing back up again. And the goal with implementing change is to finish higher than where you started. If your new normal is at the same place or lower than your status quo. You just wasted a whole lot of street cred in your organization that you were effective at planning and finding the change that was going to bring people up. So yeah, it does really equate to grief
Yeah.
because whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And when you're saying yes to a change, you're saying no to the status quo, and it has to go away. And people process that like grief.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so interesting. And obviously this is a topic that I'm fairly ignorant to. So I'm so interested. You and I are obviously having this intellectual philosophical conversation around change management. Do you talk to your team about it? Like, do you talk to them about this? That like the stage that they're going through right now is denial, and that once they've accepted that it's going to happen, now they're in despair. Do you talk to them about that?
Yeah, we actually have talked to them about that as we're going through a large change as an organization right now. My learning and development manager here at Aeon shares the passion for change management and just sees the importance of bringing that up, not only to our leadership team, but all the way down to our site level.
I
We're,
love it.
we're telling people, like, hey, it is okay that you're going to like be in a bad spot for a while and trying to figure out how to start getting back into your daily groove with new tools.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's normal. The message to the leadership team was, hey, we're all going down, but we have to show the team we're going up,
Yeah.
right? Like in this room, we can be in our pit of despair, our zone of disruption, whatever you want to call it, and we can have those candid conversations with each other. But when we leave this room together, we have to be those change champions and help others come along this road. So it's different conversations, but yeah, it's super important to recognize that it's okay to have anxiety or fear of what's coming.
Yeah, I love that sort of honesty. At Elmington Property Management, when I was a part of that leadership team and had some really awesome leaders by my side, we embraced this concept of front stabbing because we wanted to create, and I know that always sounds a little crazy, but we wanted to create an environment where we were really pushing our on-site team members, really specifically our regionals and our community managers, to be incredibly transparent and open and honest with their team members. What we would find is that, a lot of times you put a community manager into that role, and in many instances, they've been promoted into that role, and it's their first time actually managing people. And it's a lot of times it's the team that they were once a part of because they were the leasing consultant and the assistant manager, and they were
Sure.
good friends with the maintenance team there. And now all of a sudden they're their boss, and it's really hard. So it's really hard to have those difficult conversations. Like when that leasing consultant who used to just be your best friend and now she reports to you, constantly comes in late every morning. Like you don't want to have to go say, it's very hard for you to say that to her. And so we wanted to embrace the uncomfortable element of that, so that we gave them the words, so that when they had the conversation, they would sit down and say, we are going to have a front stabbing moment, and it's going to be hard for you and it's going to be hard for me. This is painful, but we need to talk about it. And let's talk about it. But it's almost like admitting that there's denial and despair and that there's a front stabbing moment. It's going to be hard. It's like saying those words kind of eliminates a lot of the pressure, because then you acknowledge what was there and then you can move on.
Yeah. No, I love that idea. As you were explaining it to me, I was thinking a parallel to the hotel industry where, like we're trained not to say, like we're not allowed to say no.
Yeah.
In fact, they would train you on like the not saying no sandwich of positive or positive, negative, positive. And it's like I don't feel like that's authentic. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have
Mm-hmm.
to call it out on exactly what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I don't want to do this either. So let's figure out a solution forward so that we don't have to do this anymore. Because I
Yes.
don't want to be here. I love that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I've actually read books about the positive sandwich being a really bad management strategy, because now, and maybe that's different when you're managing customers. I don't know. I have not had that hospitality training, I'll alone that. But from a employee standpoint, it says that the majority of the time, what that ends up doing is making the employee confused, because they're like, okay, so I did do something good or didn't? I don't really know, and it ended positive, so I don't know if I need to work on anything or like what. So yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Something else that, gosh, I just do not want to leave this part of the conversation, because I'm so interested in it. You are, I think, like one of the things that I think obviously you have become a master at is turning obstacles into opportunities. And I actually just finished a book by Ryan Holiday, which is really based in the Stoic philosophy. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. I don't know if you've read it. If you haven't, I have a feeling you would love it. But you have this unique ability to turn obstacles into opportunities. And I'd love, like, if you have any thoughts around that, or why that's so important to you, or ways that you've done it in the past, I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, that was one of my big eye-opening moments when I made the jump from market rate housing into a nonprofit
Mhm.
affordable housing provider is
Yeah.
is just kind of how people approach those challenges. And I was really surprised that everybody, to me, it looked like they were beat down.
Hmm.
And in affordable housing, it is challenging. We have tons of regulations.
Yeah.
We have razor thin margins. We're constantly asking for grants and funding sources and legislation to give us money.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. But at the same time, it's also the opportunity to look at it in a different way. And when you show up to work every day with this beat down, everybody's out to get me, I don't know how we're going to get through this mentality, I've always been a believer that that's what is going to manifest around you.
Yeah.
I can't be like, I would be lying to you if I said I was this super positive person all the time, because I have those moments too. But reframing things, I feel is really powerful. It's not a challenge, it's an opportunity for us to figure out either how to deal with that in our daily reality and not let it bother us,
Hmm.
or it's an opportunity for us to figure out a different way and then share it with everybody. And to me, that's like a pivotal moment, and something that's pivotal with the leadership at our organization is we don't want to be this beat down, stuck in a rut, um, same thinking time and time again. We want to figure out solutions. We want to figure out new ways to do things, and we want to figure out how to propel affordable housing forward.
Mhm.
That really surprised me when I first started in the industry and just talking and networking with other nonprofits. It's wow, you all must be really sad all day. Like find a glimmer of hope and kind of jump behind it and try to be a champion instead of somebody who is not being allowed to move forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We all have personal experiences with the government that are frustrating, even down to just like trying to get your driver's license renewed at the DMV. Like it just feels like it's so much harder than it needs to be. And so if you take that and you multiply it by 1,000, like that's what affordable housing is, right? I mean, like that's you're stuck in those regulations and dealing with government entities all day, every day. And it's really hard. I mean, from my company's perspective, we integrate with and work with states and federal programs. And so we'll call one day and get one answer, and then we'll call the next day and get another answer. And my team, from time to time can get really frustrated with it. And the answer is for me is we are so well situated to be able to take that and hear it and be okay with it and hear it the next day and then just quickly adapt and change. But we're building the conduit so that our customers don't have to do that anymore. Like that's so if you think about that, like we're taking that very difficult experience and turning it into a really incredible solution for hopefully for our customers. And so I agree, like finding the positive in it can really change how you experience not just work, but life.
Right, right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And that's a part of the obstacles the way for me when I read it. And I actually read something recently too. The CEO of NVIDIA said something about how, I think it was in a conversation he had with college graduates. I'll have to find the link. I'm going to butcher this up. But anyway, he mentioned that he really only considers hiring people at NVIDIA who have had extreme struggles in their lives. He's like, if you haven't struggled, then you don't know how to really think outside the box and really find the way to win and create success, no matter how hard the challenge is that comes your way. So he's like, I encourage people, especially those who have struggled, to find a way to look at it and see how incredibly lucky they are to have had that experience in their lives, to have struggled, and that is what is going to help them create untold amounts of happiness and success in their future.
Yeah, that's great. And it, like for sure easier said than done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think changing that mentality in your head and being grateful for the obstacles that you have the opportunity to face is difficult, but once you can flip that switch, I think the value is there. Um, so that's one of my favorite things. And I will say, I was also looking at a post that you put on LinkedIn recently that was kind of capturing 2024 for you. And one of the things that I loved is it had your 2024 vibe, and it included operator, steward, and engineer. And so I have a question. Which one of those three resonates most with you right now, and why?
Oh, that's hard.
Okay.
I honestly, when I saw that, like I jumped on a bandwagon trend and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that kind of describes David. Um, I think right now I would say probably steward and engineer kind of
Okay.
resonate a little bit more. Steward just because I always feel as leadership, we are stewards of the organization and our people.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as we're going through change as an organization, I have to do what I can to protect people and make sure that they're going to be okay and have the tools and resources that they need to continue their jobs. So that's something that I've always taken in any role that I've been in is that's what I do.
Yeah.
I actually would be a terrible leasing agent. I'd be a terrible manager. But I can make sure people have the things that they need to be successful and that we're heading in a positive direction. And I think that's kind of where the engineer part comes into it, is there's a lot of moving parts and pieces all the time. And nothing ever goes fully according to plan. And you have to be able to look at it and understand the big picture and understand what levers you can pull to fix things, what levers you can't pull because it's going to destroy more things. And that's the other part of my job as I see it, is really having that intimate view of the organization and knowing what I can and what I shouldn't do.
I love that. I sometimes refer to this in myself. I'm almost embarrassed to admit this word because I think it comes with a negative intonation and connotation. And I don't mean for it to be, I don't think of myself negatively when I say it, but I call myself a master manipulator. It's like, I kind of think about it like a Rubik's Cube. Like you literally, like you physically manipulate the Rubik's Cube to get
Yeah,
it to where you
yeah.
want it. Right. And so I think about it that way in professionally when I'm trying to get everything aligned the way that I think that it would be best, not necessarily the way I want it. Although I think, obviously I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where what I think is best is what I think is best for Fortress, for our company. But I feel like I'm like manipulating situations um and sometimes relationships and people and their thought processes in order to get it aligned so that everyone is successful. It's always with the best intentions. So I know that there's a negative connotation to that word for some reason, but maybe I'll start using the word engineer.
Yeah, you could use engineer. Otherwise, I think of like strength finder. I think you just described yourself as a maximizer.
Okay, yeah.
It's maximizing what you have and knowing how to arrange those puzzle pieces in a way that's going to maximize your result. So
Okay, I
I
like
just
that.
reframed it for you.
Yeah, I like it. We're gonna switch out manipulator for maximizer. I like it. Oh, I have not taken the Strengths Finder in probably 8 years, and I can't remember if maximize. I feel like maximizer was in my top 5, but I don't think it was in my top 3. But you know, my number 1 was responsibility.
Really?
Yeah, I wear like a massive responsibility chip. What about you?
Mine was empathy.
Oh, okay, that's good.
I think maximizer was in my top three though.
Yeah, I can see that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, that was funny about the bandwagon. Well, I have some, but thank you for indulging me in that 2024 vibe. I have some personal questions actually that I want to talk to you about. Before we get into that, we've talked a little bit about affordable housing, but you are there's affordable housing and then there's nonprofit affordable housing. And I would, from the little that I know about the industry, I would consider those two very different industries to go into. Um, could I'd love your thoughts on that, on the difference and what affordable housing means to a nonprofit and maybe how you function a little bit differently.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. My last organization, we had maybe five-ish properties that were project-based Section 8,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really the only affordable experience that I had when I made the jump over to the nonprofit world. And here at Aeon, we have some project-based Section 8, but we also have a pretty large portfolio, and it's a portfolio that's growing for us, is our supportive housing. So think people that are coming out of long-term homelessness, folks that have been incarcerated before, folks that have backgrounds that are causing the rest of the industry to say, no, I won't rent to you.
Yeah.
So as a nonprofit, I think there's a lot of confusion between nonprofit and charity.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the funds and resources to be a charitable organization and make sure that we can take care of everyone. We still have a business to run, and we have to collect rent and manage our resources to continue our mission. But kind of how everybody looks at it here is, if we didn't serve our resident population, there is nobody looking to expand to take that on.
Mm-hmm.
and our market rate counterparts or for-profit affordable developers that are, mainly in tax credits and kind of the sexier side of affordable housing, if you will.
Yeah.
They're not going to take the population that we serve,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't come without challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But we get up every day and come to work every day with the thought of, we're still going to provide high quality housing and take care of folks that still deserve a place to call home.
Yeah.
So it is very different. But I would say I've never seen so much heart in an organization before. And I think that's something that nonprofits excel at. But then on the flip side, also probably don't excel very much at hands because that heart is so big. So I know when I started here at Aeon, it's like, oh, you came from market rate. You're this big business guy. You're gonna come in here with all these like business-minded policies, and you're forgetting that, we have a heart as a nonprofit. Um, but I look at it as nonprofit mission is to have the maximum amount of impact that we can have. If we only have heart, that really limits the impact we can make because it means we're probably not so great at making money so that we can continue our mission. So you have to have both and they intersect in the middle, which is the point I call the point of maximum impact. And I think that's kind of a very different thought sometimes for a nonprofit of we have to be just as good, if not better, at managing our business than our
Yeah.
market rate counterparts. Because if we're not, our mission suffers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I love that. What is Aeon's mission specifically?
We create and sustain affordable homes that change lives and communities.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're all about. We're developing housing, we're acquiring housing, we're maintaining housing, and providing the services that residents are going to need to really thrive in their house. It's not just about four walls. Some folks need financial literacy. Some folks need, food shelf. Some
Mm-hmm.
folks need help in other things. And it's our job to kind of find what those things are
Yeah.
and help them along to be successful. But then the other side of affordable housing too is we have a lot of workforce housing. And I think that kind of treads the water of jumping along the lines to more of a market rate affordable
Mm-hmm.
housing provider. But there are so many folks in this country that are like one catastrophe away from being evicted.
Yeah.
And affordable housing gets lesser and lesser every year as folks continue to upscale, renovate, and really buy those value added assets. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of balancing the different resident types, and it's actually a really varied management team here,
Mm-hmm.
all the way from supportive to tax credit housing. It all takes a little bit different type of person to be successful in those environments.
Yeah. And I can just imagine the difference between someone who's had experience working on a conventional property or even like you mentioned like the sexy lie tech properties, like the difference between working in a property like that versus one that is focused on supportive housing, and how even back to your story of getting started in multifamily when someone came to move in and the unit wasn't ready for them and they had nowhere else to go and their U-Haul wasn't able to be unloaded and all these things. How do you train a team to understand, or how do you train people to make that change from either the conventional or the sexy lie tech to supportive housing?
Yeah, I think that's where some of my hotel training really comes into play here because a lot of times when you're looking at service as a whole, it doesn't change based on the population you're serving because at its core, we're all human and we have human needs that need to be met. in order to have what I would call a successful interaction.
Yeah.
So it's like we all have the need to be acknowledged. We all have the need to be heard. We all have the need to be respected. And we all have this need to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And if a team can master those four things, those interactions get easier. But I will say the hardest thing for anybody to learn is actually how to close their mouth and listen. Myself included. I love to talk, as you're probably finding out. I love to talk. But that doesn't help me learn. It doesn't help me understand our residents. And sometimes the most powerful thing that we can do as service providers is to close our mouth and listen, and give those residents the space to feel heard. And sometimes those are challenging, especially when mental health challenges are in
Yeah.
play. But as raising your voice at somebody who's having a mental health challenge or cutting them off or not listening, even if you've heard the same thing 10 times over,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta sit there and listen.
Yeah.
So it seems simple, but again, it's just this very hard skill for people to master because we have so many things going on in our days. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we're hyper focused on is how do we get work out of our site offices and centralize that so that our teams actually feel like they have the time and the space to devote to those interactions and figure out how we can best serve our residents and provide them that level of service that they're probably not going to find at another affordable housing
Yeah.
provider.
Yeah.
We're kind of doing twofold, investing time and space in our leaders, and then investing in the technology to figure out how do we pull things away or make things easier for them.
Yeah. I can't tell you how much that resonates with me. My when you were speaking to the mental health issue and having an on-site team who needs to um who in a supportive housing, you're going to have people in that community who are struggling and probably having the biggest struggle of their lives. And sometimes they just need to be heard. And no matter how irrational they are, how much they're yelling, or whatever that is that they're doing, that you've trained your team to handle that in the best way possible. And my husband is actually a detective in Nashville, and so he has a lot of these sorts of experiences with people who are going through some of the biggest struggles of their lives. Right, that's generally where he has to
Oh,
intervene with them. And we were having dinner with a fellow officer, a friend of his, the other night, and they were both talking about experiences that they had had with someone who was having a mental breakdown. These were two separate experiences, and in those moments, it's technically required that they handcuff the person if they're going to escort them anyway, whether they're taking them to hospital for an evaluation or whether there was a warrant out for them and they have to actually be booked into custody, whatever happens. And they were talking about how they've made, judgment calls in those moments where they don't, because they start to put the handcuffs on, the person like freaks out and they're like, no, like, they had gotten them calmed and that one thing just like caused them to absolutely lose it. And so they find another way to manage through that situation and getting them there. And it's just, like putting yourself in that person's shoes for a moment, but also, and this kind of goes back to, I guess, engineering or manipulating or maximizing, but just understanding that what is the end result that you want here? Like the end result is you want calm, peace, understanding. Like you want that person to go back to their um back to their apartment home and to feel comfortable and to feel happy, and you want your team to feel
right.
safe and secure, and for your office to not be a place of contention and disruption. And so what do you want and how do you get there? And a lot of times it is just by relaxing in that moment and calming down and never escalating things, and sometimes, like you said, just listening, just listening.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
it's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
Really is.
Something I've learned, complete humility here. I've been doing a little bit of research over the past few years about being a better human, and one thing that I read that really stuck with me is that humans 95% of the time are listening to respond, not listening to hear. And I know that that's a problem that I have. That a lot of times I'm listening to provide my thoughts, or even as someone is speaking, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next rather than just really listening. And it's been hard, but it's something I'm working on. But it was an interesting thing to hear.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I think back, I had an employee once that I was director of marketing, and I got promoted out of that role, and I promoted somebody into that role. And I still very much was acting like the director of marketing, and she had to come to me and be like, David, who's the director of marketing? Is it still you, or is it me?
Oh,
And I'm like, oh, okay. But I went back and I really looked, and anytime she would bring something to me, I would just spew out the answer of what I would do. And I saw that as, well, I'm just being helpful.
yeah.
She saw that as I had an idea and you didn't listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually had to train myself for a while to ask her, like, okay, do you want me to give you a potential solution, or am I just here to listen and empathize with you on this challenge and give you the space to figure it out?
Yeah.
Um, but what you said really resonated. Like, I was totally listening to respond and not really listening to how I could help that individual. And it's funny how you have these pivotal moments in your life that you won't forget. And I know I've shared that story publicly before, and if she listens to this podcast, she'll know exactly who she is. But thank you. You helped me be a better leader.
Oh, I love that story so much. And I agree. I have a few really strong members of my team where I've learned that when they come to me with something, I first need to be like, what do you think the options are? And just let them talk because they're so opinionated and so strong. And a lot of times, me entering another option into the mix is just unnecessary chaos. So yeah, I
Great,
mean, that's the amazing part of having such incredible team members. So,
for sure, for
yeah.
sure.
Well, I want to step away from professional for a moment and I want to talk about personal because you have always been so every time you and I chat, you have your next trip planned and you're going to do something really cool. And then you released this really awesome blog with all of your travels and it had your top 10 at least recommended hotels that were just like incredible experiences in your, please correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Inspiration Uncharted blog?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And so I was so excited and went because this was before your blog. I've always heard you talking about traveling and doing your half marathons and all the things that you've done, which is so exciting. I thoroughly enjoyed reading that blog and I was so proud of myself. I've been to one of those 10 hotels.
Please.
It's the one here, it's the Key Biscayne, but the Ritz-Carlton in Key Biscayne is absolutely gorgeous.
Yep.
Um, but and now it is on my bucket list to go to Frost and Fire in Iceland because that looked absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So first, what is motivating you, and how do you find the time to do all of this travel with as busy as you are?
Yeah, my husband and I both work really hard. It's typical for us to both be on our laptops while watching reruns of sitcoms on the TV every night. Just go, go, go.
Yeah,
But we've kind of made the commitment to each other that we're going to take the time and, we work hard, but we also have to play hard too. But on top of that, like one of my favorite things to do and how I grow as an individual, like I really love experiencing different cultures. We
yeah,
have a lot of different culture to experience here in the United States, but when you get out of the United States, it really pushes your comfort zone. And especially for the field of work I'm in, like going to Japan and being the only white person with blonde hair and blue eyes sitting on a subway train is an experience I can't get here in the United States.
yeah,
And it's that empathy coming out and really the understanding of how does somebody new to our country feel when they first come here. And not to say that it's the same experience because it's not, but it's the way that I get to experience how it feels to be the only person that looks like me and thinks like me and speaks like me. And that really helps me see things in different perspectives and have more of an understanding. So um, I don't just love to travel to go other places. It's truly about the experience that you get. You can't get that from a textbook. Like my family, they're all obsessed with history. They're Civil War reenactors, like every historical period. Like that's not me. I know the North won the Civil War. I know nothing. Like I was terrible in history class.
Same.
But if you're standing in front of the Parthenon, you can really appreciate the Parthenon and the history behind it and the
Yeah.
people behind it. And that's like how I learn things. I have to be there. I have to see it. I have to touch it and feel it and experience it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. Honestly, I was tearing up a little bit. That's really beautiful. That's just such a beautiful way of looking at life and experiences, to be that person who looks and speaks and thinks differently amongst a crowd, and how that feels and how you handle that and how other people respond to you, and what that means for life in the bigger picture. I just think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for sharing it. Um, so you ran a half marathon in Iceland last year. You obviously prepped to release this incredible blog. I'm sure there are tons of things that I don't know about what you did last year. I know you traveled a ton. But what are the plans for this year?
Oh, so next month we're embarking on kind of probably a once in a lifetime bucket list trip to Antarctica. We are taking a cruise down there for a half marathon. So we'll be running a half marathon in Antarctica and getting to spend, I think, like 5-ish days around making friends with penguins and birds and kind of just enjoying some raw, remote beauty and just really looking forward to it. It's always been on the list to get to all 7 continents. That's the last one we haven't been to. And, a lot of trips down there, you don't get to get off the boat and step foot on Antarctica because of all of the international regulations about how many people can be on those islands at any given time. So I really lucky that I get to experience that and actually step foot on that continent.
Oh, what an experience. Although I wouldn't necessarily say lucky. I would say you've clearly worked really hard for it. Running a half marathon is not lucky. That's that's some pretty intense intentionality and self-discipline that goes into that. That's incredible. And I will say I love the commitment that you and your husband have made to the fact that it's okay that you love your work and that you love working really hard, but that you're also going to love playing and being together and be really intentional about that. I think that it's so important, because I run into a lot of executives who really struggle with that. Like, they love their work and they don't see like this work-life balance. It's more like you have work and you have personal and you have family and you have your own personal health, and like you have all these other different buckets, but work is a big part of
Yeah,
that large
yeah,
bucket. And so it's like I don't want to only work 8 hours a day. Like, like some people want to work more than that. And I think it's it's hard to find that balance. And I think it's so important to find that partner who can
mm,
understand that and accept it, and then find a way to create a relationship that works really strongly because of it, not in spite of it. So,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's been great, and I would say one of the biggest challenges though with working so hard is making it still okay for your team to just work eight
mm,
hours a day.
yeah,
And
so true.
it's like practice what you preach, but don't look at me.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I couldn't agree with you more, actually. I, actually, you're making me think of one team member in particular that I try really hard to. It's a hard line to walk when you feel like you're their, in a lot of ways, like, you set the standard, you set the expectation. Sometimes you're a mentor to these team members, sometimes they see you that way, sometimes they don't, but so you have this seat of responsibility. And like, she loves working. Like, she works in a lot of hours. No matter how often I say, like, you shouldn't, I don't want you to burn yourself out or whatever. But at the same time, who am I to say she's going to burn herself out? I've been going at this for 20 years and I'm not burned out. I love it every day. I get energized from
Yep.
work. But then there's other people that, yeah, to your point, like, they don't want to work all those hours and you don't want to make them feel guilty for not. So it's a balance for sure. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something to think about. Okay. Well, David, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I cannot believe an hour has almost flown by. I have a couple of questions that I love to, well, one question that I love to end the podcast with that I've always ended the podcast with that I'm going to ask. And then I have a new one that I'm really excited to start this year that I hope lands well with the audience. But the first one is I'd love to hear a story, just some story that you've had in multifamily about your experience. It can be funny, it can be heart-wrenching, doesn't matter at all to me. Just a story about multifamily. We all have them.
Yeah. I was thinking about that, and so many of my stories are just not appropriate to share here.
Oh, we're pretty liberal here.
But I'm going to share one from my team actually, and this happened about 2 weeks ago. We're opening a brand new senior property that has some long-term homeless units in it, and we had our first long-term homeless unit move in, and it was a gentleman who had been living on the streets with his dog and his cat for the last 5 years. And in Minnesota, you have to appreciate that we don't have the best climate here to be homeless, especially this time of year. And our portfolio manager was out there moving him in. Great guy. She took him down to his unit. She opened the door and he froze. And he walked in, and as he was walking into the unit, finally, portfolio manager noticed like his knees were shaking. He was so emotional. He basically fell into a dining room chair and just started crying because he had never imagined having a house like a brand new property. And it served as a constant reminder, and kind of as you go through a lease up and how difficult that is, it was a grounding moment for the team to remember why we're all here. But we all get to experience that whenever we go to this property because his cat is always in the window and he has this unit right next, like you have to see it when you walk up, but it's like you see the cat getting its morning sun rays in the morning and you're like, all is right with the world with just this one experience. So that's my story for the week.
Oh, it's a very good story. And I am learning that has to be the last story because now it's hard to talk. You've got my throat. It's so meaningful, though. It really is. That's such a beautiful story. So thank you for sharing. And hopefully a lot more of those. I don't normally do this. We need to move on to the next question. But I will just say that especially because of my experience through my husband of dealing with people who are in a lot of times like the worst experiences of their lives. And he, sometimes they have to, the officers in Nashville have to go to the homeless camps, especially when it's when things are a certain temperature outside and they have to try to get people to come into their shelters and those sorts of things. But I know how difficult it can be to work with someone who has been in long-term homelessness to get them into housing, and that is not easy. So it's not just about this person's experience, but it's about your team and what they're doing and like the big picture of that, and it's huge. So that is no easy feat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so next, I think this is going to be powerful too. The question that I'm wanting to add to the ending of my podcast moving forward is a book recommendation. So I love reading, and I love when I get recommendations for books from people. In fact, The Obstacle is the Way was a recommendation from a good acquaintance of mine, and I absolutely loved it. And so I want to start asking this question too, because obviously I'm meeting with and having conversations with amazing people like you. Is there a book that you would like to recommend?
Yeah, the last book I read was Think Again by Adam Grant. And he has a podcast that I'll listen to because he also has some pretty amazing people that show up. And as you were talking about Iceland, I would highly recommend the podcast where he actually interviewed the president of Iceland. She's a very dynamic individual. But the Think Again kind of is all about that idea of reframing. And as somebody who loves to travel, like I have tried to learn Spanish so many times and fail. And there's like this whole huge portion of the book talking about how we're learning languages wrong. Like you download
Mm.
Duolingo on your phone and you're practicing these random words. And then it's like, wow, I got to level like 74. I'm ready to go to Spain. And I sit down at a restaurant and they come and speak Spanish. I'm like, I don't know what you said. I don't know what to say. Like I just wasted 6 months on Duolingo. But his whole thing was, you have to get yourself into situations where it's okay to make mistakes. And when you're thinking about learning a language, you have to get yourself into like the state of, I'm actually talking to people. I now have to figure out how to communicate with you instead of just playing
Mm-hmm.
a little game on my phone.
Mm.
So there you see like all these new apps coming out that are like AI video tutors that you just show up and knock on a door and the person answers the door and it's like, hola, and just stands there and you're like, hola? And then it continues. So it was really unique just thinking about that, it's okay to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the biggest way we're going to learn is to find out how to make those mistakes and get ourselves to a point where we can make those mistakes to, in fact, grow.
I love that. Adam Grant is a phenomenal writer. I've read a few of his books. I have not read Think Again, so I will be adding it to my list. And I think this is a perfect wrap because you said that it's really focused on reframing. And you and I started this conversation about how you love change and how you have found a way to take change and use it to turn obstacles into opportunities, and that if we can reframe the way that we see those obstacles, that we can create not only success but happiness personally and professionally. So this was such a wonderful conversation, David. Thank you so much for being here and for
Absolutely.
sharing
My
with our
pleasure.
listeners. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you.